ॐ पूर्णमदः पूर्णमिदं पूर्णात् पूर्णमुदच्यते पूर्णस्य पूर्णमादाय पूर्णमेवावशिष्यते. So welcome to our weekly session on Saturday. Now we will start on chapter 12 of Bhagavad Gita. This chapter is very important and very practical for all of us, and it's also a comparatively small chapter but contains very practical information for our daily use. So let us go into the verses, starting from the first verse, which is the question raised by Arjun to Lord Krishna. अर्जुन बोले, जो अनन्य प्रेमी भक्तजन पूर्वोक्त प्रकार से निरंतर आपके भजन ध्यान में लगे रहते हैं और आपको सगुण परमेश्वर के रूप में उपासते हैं, और दूसरे जो केवल अविनाशी सच्चिदानंद घन निराकार ब्रह्म को ही उपासते हैं, उन दोनों उपासकों में कौन ज्यादा श्रेष्ठ है? Now this is a very profound question and very practical, because there are people who believe that God does not have any form and therefore he should not be worshipped in the form. So this question of Arjun needs to be examined in great detail, and that's what Lord Krishna will do in this chapter. He is asking that those people who believe in the form and worship you in that form, they are superior, or those who worship the Supreme Lord without form, absolutely nirakar, without any shape, without any color, form, who is better between the two? Now, this is the debate which has been going on for centuries in human race, whether we should worship the God in a form or whether we should worship in without form. And this question actually will resolve some of these issues in a very, very fundamental and nice way. So let us go into the response by Lord Krishna in verse number 2, 3, 4, 5. So the verse number 2, श्री भगवान बोले, मुझ में मन को एकाग्र करके निरंतर मेरे भजन ध्यान में लगे हुए जो भक्तजन अतिशय श्रेष्ठ श्रद्धा से युक्त होकर मुझ सगुण रूप परमेश्वर को भजते हैं, वो मुझ में योगियों से भी अधिक योगी उत्तम मान्य है. Now, this is the first verse, but this is not the complete answer. Let me read the verse number 3 and 4 also, so that it becomes a complete and cohesive answer, and then we will examine each one of them. Then verse number 3 and 4, परंतु जो पुरुष इंद्रियों के समुदाय को भली प्रकार वश में करके मन बुद्धि से परे सर्वव्यापी अकथनीय स्वरूप और सदा एक रस रहने वाले नित्य अचल निराकार अविनाशी सच्चिदानंद घन ब्रह्म को निरंतर एक ही भाव से ध्यान करते हैं, वे संपूर्ण भूतों के हित में रत और सब में समान भाव वाले योगी भी मुझको ही प्राप्त होते हैं. So now let's examine some of these issues in greater detail, so that there's a clarity on this. First of all, this chapter has been named as Bhakti Yoga because this is dealing with how we dedicate ourselves to the Supreme if we believe that this is Supreme. If we believe it is nature, then we can dedicate ourselves to the nature. Now, there are two threads here. One thread tells that you can dedicate yourself to the Supreme as in a form, you can take a form and you can worship him. Another thread says that you can, worship the Supreme without any form, absolutely nirgun. Now, this, uh, let me clarify here two things first. First is that we are in a form, we have a form, and we have sense organs, which are five sense organs, has been given to us: the organ of hearing, the organ of touch, the organ of sight, organ of smell, and the organ of taste. Now we perceive this world with these five organs. If something is beyond these five organs, beyond the perception of these five organs, then we are not able to understand that thing properly. Then certain things can be understood by mind, though they may not be grasped by our sense organs. Like, for example, we take the example of Akash. Now, Akash cannot be grasped by our sense organs, but we can understand it from the mind. So it becomes a subject of mind. We can still feel that this is the space, this is Akash, where everything exists. The whole theater of activities, is taking place in this Akash. So then could be a subject of mind which can be understood by the mind. But if there is a subject which cannot be understood by sense organs nor by mind, then what do we do? So this is the question which will be arising in the subsequent verses, verse number 3 and 4 and 5. So first of all, let us talk about the sagun. Since we have sense organs and we are able to understand the manifest world only through the sense organs, it's easier for human beings to grasp an image which is there in front of you. The image could be in any form. It could be form you like, the form which is dear to you. So you can imagine the Almighty in that form, and in front of that image you can worship him. Now this is one way of doing it. Now worship is called upasana in Sanskrit, and this is the word which has been used in Bhagavad Gita also. Upasana basically means, up means near, and asan means to sit down. Upasana means to sit down close to the Almighty, close to the Supreme. Now, it does not mean that you are sitting in front of an image, but the Supreme should be very close to you in your mind. The Upasana is an action of mind, not of body. Somebody may be sitting in a temple, but if his mind is somewhere else, maybe his mind is in a shopping center or in a school or in a hospital or in some other place, then actually he is not near the Almighty. He is not doing upasana. He is not near the Supreme because his mind is somewhere else. So the mind has to be there whether you are there or not. You are physically maybe present in a in your house, but if your mind is with the Supreme, then you are doing upasana. So upasana basically means that you, first of all, you have to be close to the Supreme. And then in front of that image which you have put up yourself, either mentally or physically, then you submit yourself to him. That submission, total surrender to him, that is upasana. That you are in front of the Supreme. You tell him that I'm a small little instrument here. I have been sent to do certain, functions in this big, large universe, like a small particle of dust on the earth, and I discharge those functions under, your supervision and guidance. So we are accepting the totality of the existence and our small role in that existence, and we are thanking the Supreme that you have given us this opportunity and we are here, we are doing this job. Now that is the real meaning of upasana. That is what one should do. One goes to the temple, one should do that. You should leave the world outside, and when you enter the temple you should be close to the Supreme. And we don't the other point here is that whenever we go to a temple or any place of worship, we go with demands. Now, that is not something which is right, because if we believe that Supreme is omnipresent, omniscient, and he knows everything, then we don't have to make a request to him, because he already knows what we want and what we need. He knows our needs, and therefore whatever you know position he puts us in, we should accept that position, uh, because that acceptance means that we are accepting the supreme command of the Supreme. We are also accepting that he is omniscient, he knows everything, and we don't have to put up a demand. Now, if we are putting up a demand, in that case, actually we are demeaning ourselves, first of all, because our demands can never be comprehensive. Today we put up one demand, tomorrow something else, day after something else, and then those demands can never be comprehensive because our understanding is not comprehensive. Our capacity of mind and sense organs is limited. So, whatever demand we put up to him, they will also have their limitations. And therefore, even if those demands are fulfilled, we have some new demand that will come up, and that process will continue infinitely. So, that is one thing. Secondly, when we are putting up a demand, we are also presuming that the God is not the supreme, he is not omniscient. He doesn't know everything, and therefore I need to tell him that please do this. So that is the second aspect, that we are actually denying the omniscient and all powerful nature of the Supreme. So that is another issue that comes up when we are putting up a demand. And thirdly, you know when we go to the door of the Supreme, or to the pray to the Almighty, we are not doing a transaction, because when you go to the Supreme and ask for something, it appears like a business transaction, that I'm coming to your temple, I'm coming and surrendering to you only if you do this for me. If you don't do, then I will not come. Now that actually is a business transaction, which is the task of the sansar, which is not the task we should do in front of the Supreme. So because of these reasons, Upasana is actually best done when we sit very close to the Supreme in our mind, wherever we sit, whether it in front of an image, whether we make an image in our mind, whether we go to a temple, or whether we sit in a very lonely, a peaceful place, doesn't really matter. But in this Upasana, we take an image of the Supreme and we worship him in front of that image, whether it is mental image, whether it is image in the physical form in a temple. Now, why do we go to temple? This question also arises with this. You see, in the ancient time, temples were set up in a very sacred manner after selecting a site which provides greater energy to humanity. And then their construction, there is a science of constructing temples in ancient India. That science actually makes it more energetic. The place becomes full of energy. That is one point. Secondly, when a lot of good people go there, a lot of saintly people go to the temples, their energy also contributes to that site, and that site becomes, a source of energy for those who are visiting the place. So that is the reason the temples became very, very significant at some stage in life. And then you can, visualize that image in the temple in your mind wherever you are. So all these factors contributed to worshipping the Supreme in the image, because without image it is not easy to worship him. Now we will understand that from the verse number 3 and 4. Now in 3 and 4, the words which have been used in Sanskrit, They are quite similar to the words which have been used in Mandukya Upanishad to describe the fourth state of human existence. That is the Vaisnavar, we have Tejas, and we have Susupta Avastha. These are the three stages. Vaisnavar is the waking state, then we have a dream state, and then we have a deep sleep state. And the fourth state, which has been described in Mandukya Upanishad, uh, actually the similar wording has been used in these verses here. Uh, we will uh, look at some of these, words here. Now, the first word is that he is omnipresent. He is everywhere. Sarvvyapi, everywhere he is there. The second is that he is cannot be conceived with your sense organs. He is not the subject of senses. So that is the second wording. He is also not the subject of mind. That is, he is beyond this, what you call uh, nirvachan. Actually, he cannot be thought of. It is चिंतन का विषय नहीं है. If you use the word in Hindi, he cannot be thought of. चिंतन का विषय नहीं है परमात्मा. Because if you cannot imagine something, you cannot perceive it with your sense organs, you cannot thought of it. चिंतन उस पर नहीं कर सकते. जैसे आकाश, you can still understand to some extent and you can visualize it in your state. But if something is even beyond Akash, which is absolutely, without any understanding, then we cannot understand that subject and it cannot become a subject of thought. Like when we talk about a horse, immediately an image of horse comes to your brain. When we talk about a monkey, a image of monkey comes to your brain. When we talk about another human being, an image of a human being comes to your mind. When we talk about a specific person, for example, we talk about Sunil Sogani, image of Sunil Sogani comes to your mind. But when we talk about the Supreme, no image comes to our mind except the image which we have formed in temples or in our worship, a variety of images which we have formed. Nothing else comes to our mind. Now, those images are the images which we have formed on our own based on our either custom, tradition, or our ideology. So that in Nirakar, absolutely Nirakar, cannot be visualized by our mind. Similarly, it cannot be, it's not moving, it's absolutely achal. It has, no color, no other distinguishing feature of any nature. It cannot be even transacted. It cannot be brought into transaction. It cannot be even described like we describe relationships, for example. We say my brother, my sister. You cannot even describe him as in that format. So Nirakar is not easy to be understood by our human sense organs, by our mind, by our intellect. And that is why Lord Krishna has said that it would be much more difficult for human being to understand Nirakar and worship him. That is why we use a form to worship him. Now, forms could be of your choice. Because if we believe that the Supreme is omnipresent, He is everywhere, it means you can take any form which is existing in this universe to worship Him. If somebody may take a, child Krishna, a lot of people take child Krishna because they find him very pleasing, very nice, and they worship him. If you like your own small, son or daughter whom you like very much, you can worship in even the Supreme can be worshipped in that form. Some people take Lord Shiva. They imagine the Mount Kailas and they imagine the form of Lord Shiva and they worship him in that form. Somebody worships Ram, somebody worships, even Jesus Christ. You worship the cross, or you have the image of Jesus Christ in so many churches around the world. So you can take that image which you like. It need not be a particular image. If we presume or if we accept that he is omnipresent, you can take any image from this universe and worship him in that image. That is the actually substance why Hindus have too many gods. Because various people decided that I will worship God in this form. And many images came up depending on the perception of the people about about the supreme. Some people in the beginning worshipped, as they call it, nature worshipping. They like when I was in Mongolia, there are still a lot of people who believe in nature worshipping there. So they worship the sun and the sky. They believe that these are representing the supreme. So you can take any form and worship him in that form. That is what we call Sagun Paramatma. And that Sagun Paramatma is easier for us to worship, to understand, because our sense organs and our mental frame can understand an image better than without any form. So this is the primary reason Lord Krishna has said that he's talking to Arjun. So he's telling in that context that Arjun, for you it is, I consider it is better for you to worship me in the form, and therefore it is easier, for ordinary human being who are not understanding the supreme in the real sense, in the nirgun sense, then it is easier for all of them to have an image of their own making, or they go to a temple and then they worship me. But worship basically means upasana, that is, you have to be close to the God, you have to leave the world behind and sit close to the Almighty. Up means close, and asan means sit, and that is upasana. You have to very close to the Supreme. Your mind has to be with Him. Then only real upasana happens. If your mind is wandering, if you are somewhere else, then that is not upasana. So that is the verse number 2. Now, verse number 3. We talk about these various qualities of the Supreme. सर्वव्यापी, अकथनीय स्वरूप, सदा एक रस रहने वाले, देन नित्य, अचल, निराकार, अविनाशी. All these words are very profound words. But the meaning of all these words is that something which is beyond our intellect, our mind, and our sense organs. Basically, that's what it means. So, what is that force? Now, when we do meditation, we try to segregate our body and mind from ourselves. Because when we use the word that this is my body, this is my mind, it means I possess the body and the mind. Body and mind is not me. That is why we use this word my mind, my body, my hand, my face, my eyes. This is a possessive pronoun. In all the languages of the world, you use similar language, similar words for the body. We also know that when a person dies, we actually say that the person has died, his body is there. So we don't say that the person is there. We always say that the dead body is there, the person has died, the person has left this world, and the body is lying there. So the person is different than the body, mind, and intellect. Now that becomes very clear to us in our what we call meditation. When we do meditation after our sessions, we also segregate our body and mind from ourselves. Now, if we do that meditation, in that meditation, it becomes very clear that we, as what we call consciousness, our consciousness, is observing even our mind. When the thought comes in the mind, the thoughts are separate and consciousness, which is observing, is separate. The observer and the observed, these are subject, and the object, these are separate. Now, subject is the consciousness, object is the body and mind, and even the thoughts which are wandering in our mind. So it becomes very clear that the consciousness is the supreme. If we can realize that consciousness, then we can understand the Nirgun Nirakar, non manifest, avyakt form of the Supreme. Now, that is the avyakt form of the Supreme, which is almost, not almost, is absolutely the same as our own consciousness, which is observing our body, mind, thoughts, intellect. So that consciousness cannot be understood with body mind. It has to be done through meditation. Here there is no upasana. So when you are, uh, you know, praying the Nirgun Nirakar, then the upasana does not work. Because upasana means you have to have an image, you sit down next to the image of the Supreme, and you worship Him, you surrender yourself to Him. But in case of Nirgun Nirakar, you don't have an image. Where do you sit down? What is that image? The image is your own consciousness. So that upasana can be done only through meditation. So the meditation is the form of worshipping the Supreme. If you are taking Supreme in the form of Nirgun Nirakar Avyakt. This is the difference between the two. And since now the word which have been used here, नित्य अचल निराकार अविनाशी सच्चिदानंद घन ब्रह्म को निरंकर एक ही भाव से ध्यान करते हुए, the word is dhyan. In the other verse, it is upasana. So this Nirgun Nirakar can only be understood in the process of meditation. It cannot be understood in the process of upasana. So in the form of meditation, when you do, you identify your consciousness separate from your body, mind, and intellect, and that consciousness is actually really the Supreme. We have the same consciousness as anybody else. In that form, that is why the word ekibhav has been used here, that then you become one with the rest of the universe. Because every single existence in this universe has the same consciousness. Whether a person is from India, from Africa, from Europe, from some other part of the world, or whether it is an animal or whether it is a bird, all of them have the same consciousness as we do. That consciousness is the life force inside each one of those species of life. And even the other species, other manifest part of the universe, that is what we call, even the mountains and the rivers, whom we call nirjeev, without life. But they are not entirely without life. As I had mentioned once earlier, that the consciousness exists in different layers and different stages. eh. There is what we very low level of consciousness, which is there in stones and in all the solid things which exist on this earth. Then we have consciousness which is higher than that, which exists in plant and other vanaspati, another forms of all these herbs, plants, and climbers and all that. Now that is higher than the first one. And then you have animal form, which is also has consciousness, which is higher than the second one, and then the human form, which is the highest level of consciousness. So the consciousness exists in the mineral regime, in the plant regime, in the animal regime, and in the human regime in different forms, in different quantities. The quantity differs, but the consciousness is the same. And therefore, once you identify yourself with that consciousness, that realization will also enable us to understand the whole universe as part of the same consciousness, and therefore we will believe that the whole universe is part of the Supreme. It is the manifestation of the Supreme. So, this realization is the ultimate realization in any human form. Once we realize this, then the what we call Mahavakya in Upanishad, Aham Brahmasmi Tattvamasi, all those are actually taking the real form. Then you start realizing that, uh, like the drop, when it merges into the ocean, it becomes ocean. Similarly, when we realize that our consciousness, which is part of the universal consciousness, I am that consciousness, then you become part of the universe. And you consider the whole universe as living entity, and you consider that I am that entity as well. So this distinction is very, what you call, transformative. This is a very advanced stage of spiritual achievement. It actually enables us to identify ourselves with the consciousness away from the body, mind, and intellect. And that state can be achieved only during meditation. So the Nirgun Nirakar can be worshipped only in the form of meditation. It is not possible to worship him in the form of upasana, which is generally understood that you sit close to the supreme. Either you form an image in your mind, or you go to a temple or any place of worship where you consider, you know, some image of the supreme, and then you sit next to it and surrender yourself to that. So there is a duality there to some extent. In the first form, there's a duality. In the second form, there's total oneness. You become part of that consciousness, so you become Advait. So real Advait actually comes only when we attain unity with what we call Satchitanand. Sat Chit Anand. That is the eternal truth, eternal Chetana, eternal consciousness, and eternal bliss. All three can be attained only through meditation, when you identify yourself with that universal consciousness. So, this is what is the fundamental distinction in worshipping in image and without image. But since we cannot reach the form without image state easily, we have to start with the image state. Once we start with the image state, our mind and our body and our thought process becomes pure, pure, pure. And once it reaches a stage of purity, then you are able to visualize the pure consciousness which you are, the eternal consciousness which we all are. And that conscious state leads us to have what we call oneness with the entire existence. And that oneness has been described in Upanishads as Aham Brahmasmi or Tattvamasi, in that kind of form. So, this is the distinction. I thought this was a good time to understand these two distinctions, Sagun and Nirgun. Both are the form of the Supreme. We have to start with Sagun because that is easier for us to understand, and then slowly, slowly we can progress, and we can, overtake or transcend the Sakar and go to Nirakar. And that Nirakar form, once you identify yourself with that supreme consciousness, then you become one with the unit, with the supreme, one with the Brahm. So then you actually become Aham Brahmasmi, that becomes a reality in our life. But that reality comes gradually because it requires a lot of purity in our thinking process, lot of purity in our personal conduct, and lot of deeper transcendence in meditation. Deeper transcendence in meditation, we are able to distinguish completely away from our mind, thinking in the mind, and our intellect. Body and we can distinguish ourselves from the body. That is not that difficult. When you close your eyes, you sit down in meditation. We do that process every week. We find that our body is separate and we are separate. But distinguishing from mind and intellect is a very refined process, and that process can be achieved only with greater practice, abhyas, and then a lot of purity of thought, lot of purity of our behavior. Then this process is complete. So this is what he is saying, that संपूर्ण भूतों के हित में रत और सब में समान भाव वाले योगी. Now that state is possible only when you identify the whole existence as part of the Supreme. Then only this सब में समान और सब भूतों के हित में. Now without that it is not possible. When you understand that everybody is part of that Supreme, everybody has the same consciousness, then that distinction completely disappears over time. And then everywhere you see the Supreme, and everywhere you see his force which is operating. Now one more point I want to make here, why the consciousness is part, or it leads us to Supreme. Actually, this was mentioned also in chapter 7, when Lord Krishna said that I have two powers. One is what you call Parashakti, another is Aparashakti. He said Aparashakti is divided into 8 forms. Those 8 forms are very clear, that is Akash, Vayu, then we have Agni, that is also, sun is the visible form of Agni, then we have water, we have earth. These are the 5 Panchbhut. And then Man, Buddhi, Ahankar. These are the 8 forms which are Aparashakti, that is part of the lower power of the Supreme. And those are the manifest part, those are the powers which are actually we can see with our sense organs. So that is the lower power. And then the life force, which is called Parashakti. That life force, once it is injected, then you have that consciousness. Now that life force, when it is taken out of the body, we know that we cannot see, we cannot hear, we cannot talk, we cannot imagine anything, because that life force enables us to do all that. The body is an instrument, it's a sort of machine, but that life force is the one which develops this machine, which brings this machine into maturity. From childhood, we come to adulthood and we become mature. And from that force alone, we are able to hear, see, watch, whatever we do because of that force. That is why in Kenopanishad, they say that he is चक्षुओं का चक्षु है. He is the eye of the eye. He is the hearing of the hearing. He is the mind of the mind. Means he is behind all these powers which we consider ours. Now that feeling that this is my power, I can see this, I can control this. Now that feeling will disappear once we realize that this consciousness is coming into our body from that supreme force. That supreme force is given us that consciousness which enables this body to function. So that consciousness, when it goes out and a person is called dead, we don't even call him, if somebody's name is Ram, for example, he's dead. We say Ram to chala gaya. उसका मृत शरीर पड़ा हुआ है. Some people even call it मिट्टी की, तो मिट्टी बची अब तो उस मिट्टी को हम पंच तत्वों में दफना देते हैं. So that is how it is expressed not only in Hindi but in other languages of the world as well. तो राम क्या था? Ram was actually that consciousness which left the body. So that consciousness is that parashakti of the Supreme, which is given to all the species which are manifest in this universe. And that Shakti we can realize only when we go into deep meditation, when we realize that consciousness that enables us to do everything we do. The body is separate, but that consciousness runs this body. This consciousness enables us to see, it enables us to hear, it enables us to smell, it enables us to, taste, it enables us to eat our food and then digest that food inside the body, which converts into so many other, parts, including the blood and bones and, what we call muscles and everything. So all those things are possible only because of that consciousness. Once that consciousness leaves our body, then we are nirjeev. We are back to those five elements which Lord Krishna talked in Apara Shakti, the nature. Or in Sankhya we say Prakriti and Purush. So we go back to that Prakriti and the Purush has left our body. So this is how we can understand this whole concept of Sagun and Nirgun Brahma. Now we'll take one more verse now here, verse number 5. उन सच्चिदानंद घन निराकार ब्रह्म में आसक्त चित्त वाले पुरुषों के साधन में परिश्रम विशेष है. Clash, that is the word which is used in Klesho adhik. That the first actually word of this verse, Klesho adhik, परिश्रम विशेष है क्योंकि देहाभिमानियों में अव्यक्त विषय गति दुख पूर्वक प्राप्त की जाती है. देहाभिमानियों में, because we are attached to our body. Since we are attached to our body, we can understand the image, but we cannot understand Nirakar. And that is why Lord Krishna says that this is all those people who worship me in form and without form, they all come to me ultimately. But those who are worshipping me in without form, in Nirakar, Nirgun form, for them it is much more difficult because we have this body, we have certain, powers given through our body through which we understand this world, and therefore those things which are beyond those powers of the body cannot be understood by this body. And since we are attached to this body, Dehabhimani means we are attached to this body, we always find very difficult to transcend the manifest world and go beyond that. So this is the real reason why Lord Krishna said that it is easier to worship me in the form. And hey Arjun, that is why I consider it better for you, and also I think it's better for most of us, those who have not reached that stage where we can understand the manifest in the proper way. For all of us, it is better to start with the manifest version of the Supreme, take an image in our mind or take an image in the physical form in a temple, and then worship him, sit close to him. That is, worship here basically upasana means you have to sit close to the Almighty and surrender to him, not have demands here and there. So that is what we have to understand the meaning of upasana has been very clearly defined in verse number 2 and then also in verse number 3 and 4. So I think we have to go by these five verses. They explain in very profound way how we should worship to the Almighty and why we worship in the form, why we worship in without form, and what is better form for us. So I would like to conclude this today because this was the crux of a practical, in practical sense, of this, these four verses. And also the question raised by Arjun was very relevant for all of us. Why a lot of these questions are asked by people, that why do you worship Ram, why do you worship Shiva, why do you worship, you have so many thousands of gods. The reason is very clear, that we are humans, we are in a form, we have five sense organs of perception, we have a mind. The image we can take in our mind and in our senses is of the manifest world. And since we believe that the whole manifest world is the reflection of the Supreme, or He is pervading everywhere, we can take any image from this world and worship to that image, and we can surrender to that image. And that would be our upasana to the Supreme. Once you transcend that image part and go to the pure consciousness, which is possible through gradual meditation, when you are able to distinguish your body, mind, and intellect away from your consciousness, in that stage, you can realize the non manifest, the avyakt. Then you can understand the formless, then you can understand the qualityless, that is, without any nirgun nirakar brahm. That understanding is possible only after certain stages in life, and that stage once we reach, then the whole universe is like one single entity for us, because everywhere the consciousness runs through, whether it is in a stone or a river, in Himalayas or in a human being or a bird, or everything is run by this consciousness. And then we realize the unity of the whole universe, and we will not do anything wrong to anybody in that state of our existence. And the qualities which are reflected of the people, some people, we call them good, some people we call them bad. First of all, those qualities are a product of what we call Sat, Raj, and Tamogun. Because of the combination of these three gunas, those qualities are coming into being. But in reality, all those people, all those humans and animals, they are run by the consciousness. They are part of the same consciousness as we are. So that unity comes into play. And once we realize that unity, we can do no harm to anybody, and we become one with the Supreme. So this is the crux. I thought I will repeat it once again, which I did just now. So I thank you for coming to this session, and I'll be happy try to answer your questions if you have any, to the extent I can. Thank you.